Born on the 20th of August 1983, I was adopted by my mum and my dad in September 1983. I was a happy baby. I had no signs of any kind of EDS. Some pictures you look back on and you think, oh, my hand was at a weird position, or look here at my knees, they're bending in slightly. But of course, no one back then thought of EDS. I don't look too happy here because I didn't want my photo to be taken. But I was a happy child. I bruised easily. But here as a teenager, this is when I started to get symptoms around age 13. This is me at 17, 18 years old. I was often off school for a long time, and I would have quite a lot of sick days. I think one year I had so many that they were very concerned about me and wrote to my parents. I would easily get injuries, like I think I tore some muscles in my neck. I had lots of coughs and colds and chest infections. I would just feel really tired all the time, especially once hitting puberty at the age of 15. I used to row at school. I was terrible at sports, but rowing I loved. And something happened to my knee. It just really hurt. And from then I ended up getting physio, and someone told me that one leg was longer than the other, one foot was bigger than the other. I didn't stand right, all those kind of things, but they said, that's just normal. It's not uncommon. And I carried on with my life. So then at university, I was quite happy. I was drinking, I was going out. I didn't really have any symptoms. And then in my last year of university, I got mumps. And after that, I was never right. I started to be completely intolerant of alcohol. I'd feel sick a lot. I'd feel faint a lot. I lost quite a lot of weight. I was tired all the time. Unfortunately, for my final year project, which was to write an album because I did a music composition degree, I spent 3 or 4 weeks off with the mumps and didn't really get any allowances, so no extra time to finish things. So everything was rushed, and I was quite disappointed that although I did get a good degree, I didn't get the grades that I wanted. So once leaving university, I decided to make the most of things, and thank God I did, and I went to Australia. There I travelled around for a month, and I went to live out my dreams and go to the Neighbours set, the Home and Away set. I'm a huge Australian soap fan. I also met a lot of nice people. As you can see here, I was holding a crocodile, baby crocodile. I ate all sorts of foods. I at this stage is still not drinking alcohol. I travelled all up the east coast of Australia, and my love of travel has always been there, but this was like a dream come true. And then when I came back, I got an internship and worked in London and travelled backwards and forwards from my parents' house, and eventually decided I loved London and wanted to move there. So I moved there in 2006, and I started to just enjoy life and become fit. So I started doing Race for Life, and this is the first one I did, which you can see here. Me and my mum did it. I'd lost a lot of weight by then, and I was running every other day, probably a couple of miles, and I did the Race for Life quite a few years in a row. You'll see later there was a completely different picture of me doing Race for Life, but this was great. I was feeling wonderful, and I started getting shin splints and things like that, and didn't think a lot of it. And then I was struck down by gastroenteritis, what I thought it was, which now makes sense that it was gastro issues with EDS, but I wasn't aware of it, and I stopped running. But nevertheless, carried on with work, still travelled with work, went to Barcelona, which is what you can see here. Did a lot of things to develop my career. This is from a piano photo shoot. I wanted to pursue my composing and actually entered into competitions and did really well, got into the semi-finals for the UK songwriting contest. I think 3 or 4 times I came a semi-finalist, which for me was a real boost. I absolutely loved work. I was a PA at a music agency working with opera singers in London. We'd have fantastic parties, as you can see here. I started drinking again. I felt great. This is like work parties, and I just was having the time of my life. And the terrible haircuts aside, as you can see here, I still managed to travel. I went, this is in Geneva. Before you saw Barcelona, I went all over different places, Paris and Amsterdam. And it was here in Geneva that the problem started for me. I would fly everywhere, and when I would get to places, Valencia was one, but Geneva was the worst. I got there and I usually had a day before and a day after my work commitments, so I could just relax and sometimes sightsee. And my stomach got so bad and I couldn't eat. I was sick for days, and I actually had to cancel going to all the work commitments I had in Geneva at this time. And I couldn't understand why, because I would get flights, eat on flights, get to the place, feel really sick, feel really tired, and then spend days and days in bed, sometimes drag myself to my meetings, and then have to fly home feeling rubbish. So it was awful, and I had to stop traveling. Now this picture is, for me, this is the very first time that I remember a POTS incident. Through work, I got free tickets to go to a concert at the Tower of London to see Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics, and there was like Bob Geldof and people like that. And on the tube train home, I remember feeling really odd. My heart started going a really odd beat, like quite fast. It was obviously the tachycardia. I didn't know, and I felt faint, and I felt sick, and I just was like, oh my God, and I hadn't had any alcohol. And from then on, I got worse and worse, and basically there's not many pictures because I literally didn't leave the house. I felt ill. I was backwards and forwards to my GP, and I was like, I'm not right. They sent me for blood tests, and I even saw a cardiologist who said it could be inappropriate sinus tachycardia, and I just was like, fine, and I carried on. But I couldn't work. I had to stop working for a whole year. The work were amazing. It was on sick pay, which was hard because I couldn't afford to pay my bills and rent, so my parents had to help me out for a year, which I felt so guilty about. But then when I went back to work, it was like phased return, and then I'd have another month off because I was unwell, and it was never ending, and I knew I still wasn't right. So I looked up inappropriate sinus tachycardia and found a forum, and someone was mentioning POTS. And then when I Googled it, I nearly fell off my chair because it was every symptom I'd had: the nausea, the dizziness, the heart palpitations, everything. I went to my GP, and of course my GP said, this is nonsense. We've never heard of this. You're a hypochondriac, you're stressed, it's your age, you're drinking too much. All the excuses under the sun. So I never ended up getting a diagnosis. So I decided to pursue the private route, which a lot of people have had to do, and went to see Professor Matthias, and he immediately, once speaking to him, said, I think you have POTS. I'm going to send you for tests. Oh, by the way, I think you've got EDS. And I was like, what's EDS? And within a few months I was diagnosed, but it was just very, very quick and a lot to take in. I just knew I wasn't coping. They put me on Midodrine, they put me on physio for my EDS, they just threw things at me, and I was still really unwell. And over the years I've gathered things. So this next picture is in Switzerland, on top of a huge mountain. We went in Christmas 2009, which was a year and a bit after my diagnosis. I'd had my EDS diagnosis too, and this was a big feat for me because on Christmas Day I actually was in bed all day, and I just felt awful. So this was Boxing Day. I agreed I'd go with my parents, but I was super worried because by then I'd done a lot of reading up on POTS. I knew how altitude would affect me. And as we go up on the train, I got more and more breathless and more Potsie, and it was horrible. So at the top here, this was like a real achievement for me, because people around me were passing out who didn't have POTS because of the altitude, and it was about -12. That's why I'm so wrapped up. That's why I have sunglasses, because it's very bright. It's like this from the snow. That's why, like if you ski and stuff, it's the same. And just generally the whole holiday, I didn't really walk far. I spent a lot of time in my room, in my bed. I just felt terrible. And then the following year, in April, this is a picture of me looking terrible after having spent about 2 weeks in hospital, as out of nowhere I started feeling sick a lot. I couldn't eat, I couldn't swallow, I couldn't drink, and I went to A&E and they admitted me and put me on a drip, and I couldn't eat for months. They said it was gastroenteritis again. They thought I had some kind of psychological issue with eating. And eventually, because I'd already had EDS and POTS diagnoses, by then I'd made a few friends with them, and they're like, oh, there are gastro issues associated with these two conditions. We think you have gastroparesis. And again, no one believed me, so I had to pursue the private route, and I had tests, and lo and behold, I had gastroparesis. So this is me after losing about 2 stone in 3 months from the photo before. I managed to get out 2 days before my mum's birthday, which was best present for her. But this is me. I had got down to about 16 stone here. I've always been, since a teenager, I've always been overweight for my age or in general. So for me, this was like, I'd been trying years with Weight Watchers and then suddenly just dropped the weight. And then the following year, I put on a little bit, but this is me feeling much better. So you can see how it goes from like feeling terrible to good. And then this is the amount of pills I was on. It's pretty much a little bit less now, but I was on this amount of medication for a long time. People didn't really understand why, but I find that this is a good way of managing it with a Dosset box, so I don't get too confused, because I'm on morning, lunch, dinner and bedtime meds to keep my body going. I was still working at this time, and I held a fundraiser for EDS UK. You can tell this is back in 2011 because the logo looks very different now. But I did a charity cake sale. I was trying to raise money. I think I raised about £130 in the end, because luckily where I worked, there were businesses around there. People paid an absolute fortune for just cakes. So I was very, very lucky. These are the things that have helped me along the way when I was living in London. My shopping trolley called Flora. If I went out shopping, I couldn't carry the heavy bags home, and I didn't want an old lady looking trolley, so I scoured the internet. I think I got this on eBay, and it literally, if I went shopping, it was my lifesaver. You can fit so much in there. And then I would struggle at work because I was obviously office based, so I bought this wrist support. I would have to buy all my own stuff, all my own research. Writing, these are called Pen Again. Very, very good if you struggle with grip and pain. And then this is the final race for life. So comparing it to the first picture, you can tell that I was struggling. I was determined to still do it, but I couldn't run by this stage. This was 2011, and I went round with 2 crutches and I walked the course, which I was one of the last people to finish because everyone was running, but I was determined to raise money, and it was just really, really tough. And again, by this time, since the 2010, so a year before when I lost weight, I put more weight on again. And I remember at this stage I was doing Weight Watchers, and I'd done this like 3-mile walk, and I think I lost a pound, and I was so upset with myself. But at that time I was on all sorts of medications. I was on gabapentin, which a lot of people have reported that they've put on weight with that medication. So that was hard. Then the next hardest thing was moving out of London, which was really tricky. The reason I have this photo is I'd literally just moved, and I had a 10-year reunion, I think it was, with my friends from school, and you can see me up there, second from the right. I'd put on a lot of weight by this time. I decided in my job I couldn't handle it anymore. I was taking so much time off, and my work were deliberately giving me more and more work, and then making out I couldn't cope with it, as their way to get rid of me, because lots of people were leaving anyway, and obviously if they sacked me, I could say it was unfair dismissal because of my disability. So I moved back with my parents, which was the best decision for me in the end, because it meant that I could concentrate on my health. I could rest a lot. I had no stresses from work, and being out of London was great because I had no bills to worry about, and it was just fantastic. But explaining to my friends what was wrong, because by this point I was still able to walk around, was really hard. They didn't get it, and they didn't really want to listen about what was wrong with me. And then I started getting injuries. I got this random picture. This is just from walking into a laptop, I seem to remember. I had a massive bruised toe for weeks. I get random injuries like that. And then everything changed when I met this man, my now husband. When I moved back home, I thought, well, that's it, because in London I tried dating. Nothing happened. The guys never called. As soon as I mentioned EDS or POTS, they'd run a mile. But I met Adam online on Match, and we chatted for months and eventually met up. This is our first holiday together, just a month after we met, in Norfolk. And then we just hit it off, and we've been together now 6.5 years nearly. We got married last March, and he's amazing. He understands my illnesses. He understands everything about me, really. He's very patient and kind. He would never run a mile. Even when we discussed children, and how with EDS is a 50% chance I could pass it on, and I'm not sure if I could come off all my meds. He said, as long as he has me, that's all he cares about, and that's amazing. Soon after, when we met, I wasn't using a wheelchair. If we went places like days out like this, I'd have to hire a scooter to go around, because my POTS meant that I really couldn't walk far, because I'd get dizzy and breathless and faint, and my joints would also hurt. This picture I love because this is when we went to the Paralympics in 2012. And David Weir is somewhere in this picture. He actually won this race. And for me, this is around the time I bought a manual wheelchair, and I had to go in that because it was quite a long walk from the station to the Olympic Stadium, and it was really hard because my dad wouldn't accept it, and he wouldn't push me in it, and he said you don't need it. But Adam was amazing, and seeing other people like this in wheelchairs just really, really helped me. I put on a lot of weight again, as you can see, on another holiday, and just my health was so up and down. I started to get problems all over the place. I had terrible pain, end up needing my appendix out in 2013, which is I think just after this was taken, or before, I can't remember. And then my biggest weight, this was at my godson's christening, and me on the left in my chair there. By there I'd progressed to needing a powered wheelchair that tilted back because my POTS was so bad. My dress there was, I think it was a size 22. I was huge. I put on so much weight because I'd also by then had my gallbladder removed, and I think I'd been in hospital for spinal problems, so I'd been very inactive. I'd had loads of steroids, loads of medication. I Comfort Air because I felt so depressed about all my health. It was just nasty. That was a bad time for me. But then it was my 30th birthday, and I'd lost quite a lot of weight from then. I started kind of just eating healthier. But my 30th birthday was also very hard because I had family and friends there, and I remember that whole day I was worried about things, if people would turn up and things would go right, and I remember I couldn't eat, and then near the end of the night I was just like so sick, just because my body was just not able to cope with standing up. I'd been dancing, I'd been pretty much doing stuff I shouldn't have done, but I pushed my body to the limits and it just broke, and I felt really ill. So then another incident was we went to the Isle of Wight, and it was a lovely holiday. We decided to go camping for the first time because as a child I used to camp a lot with my mum and dad, and Adam had never camped, and so we decided to get, a fair decent sized tent, and this is us camping. My only issue was that by this stage in, I think it was 2015, I struggled to get in and out of the tent, like kneeling, bending, getting on in and out of the bed, just everything. And we had to, at this stage, I couldn't take my power chair. There was no room. I didn't have a wheelchair accessible car. So we took my manual wheelchair, and the Isle of Wight for me was so inaccessible. The shops were, the tourist attractions, everything. And I was quite heavy still then, so Adam didn't really push me around. So I would honestly not go camping again in a tent like this. I'd have to, I don't know, do something slightly different, but it was a learning curve. And then this is when we went to see Queen. I think it was the same year, but this time again, we took my manual wheelchair and we had to park in a car park near the venue, and there were so many slopes everywhere. Adam struggled to push me up. And this was by the stage we were like, right, we need to be able to take my power chair wherever we go, because again, we'd gone on holiday and I was in my manual chair and Adam was exhausted pushing me everywhere. So eventually we sold my car and I got a second-hand wheelchair adapted vehicle with a ramp so we could take myself everywhere. Later that year, sadly, our first cat died. But I didn't want to put it on here because it was a sad memory. But we got the adorable Mo, and he is my carer cat. He is very intuitive. He knows when I'm ill. If I'm in bed all day, he'll come and lie with me and snuggle, and he won't leave me. He's very sensitive like me. He seems to be able to twist his legs back, just like EDS, and he has allergies the same as me too. So we're very much in tune with each other. I absolutely love him to bits, and this is him snuggle with me in bed on a bad day. This was later that year. Adam finally proposed on Christmas Day, which was amazing. We'd been together by that stage for 3 years, I think. Coming up to 4 years, and that was an amazing moment for me. And this is us on Christmas Day, as happy as anything. I never thought in my, from when I got diagnosed, I thought that's it. No one's ever going to want me because I'm just going to get worse and worse as far as I'm concerned, because from 2008 to 2012, I had a new diagnosis every year, or 2 or 3 every year. And I just thought, how can it get better? And it did. And it goes up and down through your life. So the next thing I managed to add to my list of things is I started getting these weird scabs, not just on my arm, but all over my body. I didn't want to show you the other ones because they were gross, but they were like itching, and it turned out that I needed a biopsy to see what was going on. I was worried this was afterwards because they had to local anaesthetic, and I fainted for that because the adrenaline, lidocaine doesn't work with me. It doesn't numb it, and it makes me faint. So eventually they managed to numb it enough, even with me half passed out, enough to get a biopsy and sew me up. And within 3 days, they said I have a condition called nodular prurigo, which isn't even related to EDS. But given that our skin is bad, that's what I have. And so now every time I get an itch, my skin just flakes off. It becomes very, very sore. And then I have steroid creams and bandages, and it's just a case of managing it. There's no cure for that. Just have to avoid irritants. And then in jumping forward to 2016, I put on all the weight again. I felt so bad because I'd just, again, I have a roller coaster of emotions. If I have a bad time, I eat. If I have a good time, I eat. But it's particularly when I'm depressed. But we went to the Peterborough Truck Fest, and we met these 2 guys. If you've ever watched a American show called Lizard Lick Towing, This is Amy and Ronnie from that, and we were really excited to meet them because we're huge fans of that. That is not on anymore, but it was on a few years ago. And then I decided enough is enough, pull myself together, I need to lose weight and I need to do stuff for EDS. So I decided to run a stall. This was for raising money for EDS UK. As you can see, I zebrified myself. I got my EDS UK t-shirt, and I had a stall at a summer fete in my area and raised quite a bit for EDS UK. So I thought I've got to start helping other people and stop feeling sorry for myself. So I'd lost a lot of weight, and this is a year later. I'd lost about, because obviously I was engaged, we were going to get married, I wanted to look good for that. So I think I lost in total 3 stone. This is my dad's 70th birthday party, and it's the first time a lot of people had seen us for a while. And I was just really proud of myself for losing the weight. These are random pictures of that year. We went to Legoland. I had the freedom of my power chair, so I was no longer a prisoner in my house or relying on Adam. This is with Miranda Sings. This is a birthday present. I absolutely love her. Then we got Alice, our second cat. She is adorable. She's not at all like Mo. She's her very own independent, feisty self, but she is super cute and we love her to bits, and she keeps me going. To fly for the first time, and this is the first time I flew, this is on the plane, with my water of course, to Switzerland because we're huge fans of Queen. We went to Freddie Mercury's 70th birthday party they have in his honour. Lots of fans go, lots of his family and friends go, and I was really scared because I hadn't flown since my diagnosis is when I got really ill. So my advice was taken from so many people, and basically I just drank lots of water. I didn't eat on the plane because your stomach can't process it. That's why I was feeling so sick. And when we got there, I felt absolutely fine. This is me very happy on the train from the airport to the hotel. I'd actually made it and felt okay, and my chair was in one piece. So this is me elated by Freddie's statue in Montreux. And then at the end of our trip, which was super exciting, is we actually met Freddie's sister, who's in the middle there between me and Adam. And yeah, that was an incredible moment for us. We met her son and daughter as well. And then I got a lot better at the beginning of 2017. I'd lost the 3 stone. I decided to come off all my pain meds because I was still in pain, and slowly I came off them over the course of 6 months or so. And I noticed that my pain was no different and the side effects had all gone. So I didn't feel like a zombie. I didn't feel depressed, tired, anything. I felt better. So I started to come off other meds as well, and it was amazing. I was at my best. I was able to walk more. I was starting to do exercise. I would go around the block with my crutches still, but wouldn't use my chair as much. My POTS was still not great, but my EDS was better, and I felt great here. So then we had my hen night, which, I was drinking again. I was able to drink. I felt great. And this enabled us then to get married. And this was in March last year. I didn't take my wheelchair. The photographer was amazing. He made sure that whenever there was a moment that I would be standing around, that someone had a chair there for me to sit down. I didn't want my wheelchair in the pictures just because I didn't want a reminder of what I'd become. I'd become reliant on my wheelchair. But the end of the day of the wedding, I was exhausted. The dress was quite heavy, and that's something I probably would have changed. But it was an amazing day. And very, very shortly after, I'd been having problems that year with my sinuses. This is us at a Guns N' Roses concert, which was our wedding present to each other to go to the concert. We're huge Guns N' Roses fans, and they did their comeback tour, and they did like 2 dates in the UK, and we managed to get tickets for one of them. And basically, my sinuses, I'd had terrible infections over and over again over 3 or 4 years, and so in June 2017 I ended up needing my septum straightened. Apparently it was very wonky, it was a Z shape, whether that's an EDS thing or whether it's happened. And also my sinuses, two of the cavities were blocked, so they drilled a bigger hole for it to drain, and it's really helped, although my allergies do flare that up from time to time. So I had to recover from that, and which was really tricky. And so then it was just, quite a difficult time. Then it was my birthday, and I was back in my chair again because of the operation. I'd been very inactive. I'd lost my sense of smell, lost my sense of taste. I was just eating things that I really enjoyed, which was junk food, and put on weight again. And after my birthday, this is how I felt. I was exhausted just spending the day out. We literally went shopping. I was in my chair. We went for a meal and I was done in. Then we went on our honeymoon eventually. We were supposed to go in April of last year, but because of my sinuses, they said I couldn't fly until I'd had my surgery, and my surgery was in the June. So we rebooked. We were insured, thank God, and we went. But as you can see, I'd put on a lot of weight again because of the surgery and my sinuses. And I've always struggled to lose weight. It's kind of through my family. It's a genetic thing. We managed to get to the beach. I took my crutches. There was a golf buggy that took you from the hotel down to the beach. So that really helped. And my wheelchair took me around the complex if we went for the breakfast, lunch or dinner. The beach was amazing. It did have a boardwalk all the way down from the top of the beach to the sea. So if you did need to use your wheelchair, you could. But with my powered wheelchair, I didn't really feel I could leave it in case someone stole it. And it was a really hot, it was in Greece. So I didn't want my chair to break in the heat because it probably would warp. But the biggest achievement for me on there was getting in the sea. I wore special sea shoes, which were lightweight and waterproof. And I actually swam for the first time in about 5 or 6 years. And it was great. It didn't make my joints any worse. The sea was very warm, which obviously helped. And being salty, it was easier to float. But for me, that was a massive achievement. And we just had generally a great time there. And so then the next photo is our first year anniversary. We recreated some of the pictures from our wedding. But unfortunately, I was there in my chair, whereas in the wedding, there was no pictures of me in my chair. My hair colour's obviously changed, but when we went, our wedding, it was quite mild, and in this photo, it was -7 degrees. It was the beast from the east, as anyone in the UK might remember, earlier this year. It was freezing, and we're so glad our wedding didn't happen this year. And I've been active. I've been out and about. I went with my mum to the Royal Albert Hall to see a Harry Potter live screening where a live orchestra played the soundtrack along with the film, and it was incredible. Again, we took my chair and my car. We parked right outside the Albert Hall in a reserved disabled space for free. And that really is the way to go for me, because getting across London in a wheelchair is a nightmare. Having lived in London not using a wheelchair, I knew what access was like. And then most recently, we went away to Wales, and this is the most recent photo of me. I started to lose a little bit of weight because my appetite had gone. But all the places we'd gone weren't wheelchair accessible. So everywhere we went, I took my crutches, which you can see are zebra print. And basically, by the end of the holiday, the last day, I spent the whole day in bed. I was in so much pain. I was exhausted. And since I've been back from that, my stomach issues have flared up. My gastroparesis has got worse. And I'm now seeing a dietitian tomorrow. And I'm also on the books to see Professor Aziv's privately as an urgent case, because I haven't been able to eat for 7 or 8 weeks, any solid food. I think my gastroparesis has flared up majorly, and we just don't know why, and if it's going to just go back to normal on its own, or if I'm going to end up needing to be tube fed, I don't know. But as I say, you can see from my life, and in a very brief way, even though this video is quite long, it's a roller coaster. I'll have 6 months of being fine, 6 months of being terrible, or I'll have a couple of months of being bad and the rest of the year good, or the whole year is terrible. It just never, you can never ever predict it. So that's how things are for me, really. So there you go. That's my journey in life so far.